Well, it's time to hear from an amazing man who just less than 2 years ago had an accident that was a terrible car accident where one arm was torn from its socket and he lost over 50% of his blood. And he lost an arm. And losing an arm would be devastating news to anyone, but especially to Mark as a career organist and pianist. He was 18 years with the Crystal Cathedral as organist there. And today his life is back on track as God has restored his music career, and he's here to tell us his story. But first, let's enjoy his music. So please welcome Mark Thallander. He's playing Joyful, Joyful. Right. Here he is. It's hard to believe that Mark has only the use of one arm. His story of overcoming, of course, he can use 2 feet, though, at the same time. And so you can get a lot done with those feet on an organ. But that's amazing. His story is an inspiration to many people. And he's on his way over here right now to join us and tell us a little bit about his story. And we'll fill in the details here. Welcome, Mark.
Mark, welcome. So happy to have you.
Yes, thanks so much for coming. Well, that's amazing that you can do that, get such a beautiful sound out of that organ with the one arm. Now, we're going to get into the story and we'll find out exactly what happened, but God bless you. Let's back up a little bit and tell us about you're getting into the whole music career and what that looked like, pre-August 3rd, 2003.
Well, actually, it started when my mother was a teenager, and she was to have her first piano lesson, and she fell off a horse on the farm in North Dakota and broke her leg. Oh. And when I was conceived, then years later, she and the church pianist made a covenant that I would become a church musician. So I didn't have too much choice in the matter. So it started in the womb, and then I went to Central Bible College, Evangel University, and Vanguard University, and then on to graduate study in Southern California, and then became a part of the staff of the Crystal Cathedral for 18 years, and then some other churches following that. And then I was, the summer of 2003.
Okay, before we get to that, I'm interested still in the home life. Okay. So music was a part of your home.
Correct.
And so it was just natural for you to flow right into. Is the piano the first thing you got into?
In the 5th grade, my parents won an organ for a month. with 4 free lessons.
Oh.
So I took those 4 free lessons, and when I came home and the organ was gone and there was a piano there, I was very disappointed. But they knew that I needed a good, strong piano foundation before I moved onto the organ. So then I studied piano.
And so then did you learn the piano and the organ playing church music? Was church a big part of your home
Yes,
life?
church and Youth for Christ. And every Sunday, about 6 times a day, I listened to the Revival Time radio broadcast. And it was my goal to be the pianist for that. And so I listened to exactly what the pianists would do and the improvisation of the hymns and gospel songs. And then I was accepted to be the pianist my freshman year at college, so I moved to Springfield, Missouri.
Springfield, Missouri. Well, that rings a bell for us.
That's right. We attended Evangel for 4 years as well. That's where we met. And so, as a little side note, but we don't want. It's not our story. It's
No,
his
it's
story.
your story.
Right.
So let's then take us to that day. It was August 3rd, 2003, just less than 2 years ago. Tell us about what happened.
Right. That was a wonderful summer for me. A year before that, I had traveled with the Vanguard University Concert Choir, and programs had been done in Carnegie Hall and St. Patrick's Cathedral. And I was invited to come back to both of those venues and play. And then I was selected to play the organ for the 50th anniversary of the Revival Time reenactment broadcast, which was in Washington, D.C. at General Council. And it was that week, after playing for that broadcast, that a friend of mine from Central Bible College, who was pastoring in Massachusetts, said, "Would you come and play at our church?" And I said, "It's my only vacation Sunday of the whole year, but I'll come." So I went and played, and then on the way home, I was caught in a storm which followed me through Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and into Maine.
You were driving alone?
I was driving alone, and the Toyota 4Runner hydroplaned at the exit. When I was getting off, the water was just coming very, very heavily and furiously over the exit. And I was thrown into a ditch and thrown over and then up over a barricade into the oncoming traffic onto the turnpike.
Into the oncoming traffic.
Right.
Now, were you hit by oncoming traffic?
No, the storm was so heavy that most of the people had pulled off to the side of the road.
Wow.
So there were no other people involved in the accident. And
So what happened then with when the impact of you know the
well,
car?
I did not realize it, but my left arm was pulled out of the socket, and I was hanging into the passenger seat. My glasses had been thrown off. I thought that a woman had gotten out of her car and was helping me. She asked if I could talk to her. She encouraged me to keep my eyes open. She also asked me if I could turn off the ignition, which I was able to do. And when I turned off the ignition, I realized that the entire windshield was now red. And so I prayed and asked God if there was something that I could do. And then this arm went over and the hand went into a hole here. And it took about 4 or 5 days at the hospital for them to get all of the blood out of my fingernails. But I was told by a doctor just a few weeks ago that if I would not have done that, that I probably would have bled to death because I lost 50 to 70% of my blood.
Oh my. So you said you're hanging into the passenger seat. You had your seatbelt on.
Correct.
And so you're literally strapped in.
Right.
But the vehicle is then
The vehicle was
on its
on
side,
the
on its-
passenger
Okay.
side, and I was hanging into the passenger
and so
side.
you put your own hand in
Right.
there to staunch the bleeding.
Yes. And then I asked the woman if help had been called, and she said yes, the paramedics were on their way.
Did you ever see this woman? Did you ever look at her?
No, and you know, the state trooper said there were no witnesses, and when the paramedics arrived, she said, I can see their lights, they're right here, but no one ever saw her. And
Really?
the television program, It's a Miracle, contacted me, and they also contacted the Wells, Maine Emergency Services, and no one seems to have any record of anyone calling emergency services or of this woman.
Really?
I simply wanted to write her a thank you note, and there was no information. So a friend of mine said, God sent an angel to take care of you.
Wow.
You heard the voice of an angel that day.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, then you're laying there then, and help then comes to arrive, and just fill in the rest of the story there.
I'm taken 40 miles to Portland, Maine, to the medical center, and ask to sign a release in case they have to amputate my arm.
Now, did you tell them what you did for a living?
Yes, all the way in the
I'm sure you
ambulance,
did.
and the surgeons were waiting for me, and they said that they would do everything possible to save it. And then on that Tuesday, well, I found out then on Monday, that was a Sunday night, I found out Monday my father had had an accident the same night as I did. He had fallen and broken his hip. Tuesday, when he went into surgery, I had a morphine overdose, and I kept pressing that little button, and I kept getting more morphine whenever I had pain, but I did not know that it was giving me double the amount and that it did not stop when it was supposed to. So I was traveling through a white tunnel, and even in my unconscious state, I realized I had heard these stories before of people going through white tunnels. And I thought this was it. I was very much at peace, and I thought I'm entering heaven. And all of a sudden, someone was slapping me and calling my name, and I just thought, I don't think this is how Jesus would be welcoming me into heaven. And there were nurses and doctors standing around, and they had brought me back.
Wow.
Unfortunately, my father did not recover from his surgery, and I listened to his funeral then in my hospital bed. The pastor put a cell phone on the pulpit. So it was quite a week.
Wow, what a devastating week. Now, tell me what went through your mind when you finally realized, or you woke up and realized that the arm had been amputated.
Well, I have phantom pains, which you may have heard of when people, I still feel the arm there.
Even today?
Even today. And so when I came out of the anesthesia from the surgery, the surgeon, I guess, told me that they had to amputate. But I misunderstood. I thought he said they did not have to because I could feel the arm right there in the same position it was when I came in. And then a friend of mine came in later who had been a pastor at the Crystal Cathedral, and the nurse said, I don't think he understands. And so he told me, and then I said, oh, wow, and I went back to sleep.
Wow.
So then in the days and months after that, how were you coping inside with this devastation?
I realized because of the love and prayers from around the world, as well as the angel really coming and taking care of me, and feeling so close to Jesus like never before. I knew that there was a reason that I was still here, because twice in 2 days I almost died. So I decided that instead of me being in the driver's seat and God being in the passenger seat, I thought we were very close, and I let God lead my life. Basically, I thought God was telling me where I should go. I decided we were switching places, and God was going to be the driver, and I would be the passenger, and I would just be along for the adventure. And wherever God would take me and give me the opportunity to share my story, that I would go.
Now, just listening to your story, Mark, I can't help but think there had to be a time, maybe not. For me personally, there probably would be a time where I'd say, God, why did you let this happen? You could have guided the surgeon's hand to restore my arm. Why me? Why did this happen? Did you ever hit rock bottom at that and say that to God?
I think because I was so grounded in possibility thinking after being 18 years at the Crystal Cathedral and hearing so many guests tell such positive, powerful stories about how God helped them through a real tragic time in their life. And also my life verse, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I just moved on, and I did not have that downtime. And I prayed, God, if you want me to have this downtime, and if you want me to experience those things and learn more about you, then please let me go through those. But I actually went from point 1 to point 4. I believe there's an anger and a depression stage in points 2 and 3. And I think the miracle is that through all the prayers of friends and churches that I moved from point 1 to point 4 and could continue on. And I've had major composers in the US and Canada who have or are writing music for me for one hand and 2 feet. And so that's been a real encouragement, and churches where I have played have invited me back, and even I was invited back to play again at Carnegie Hall. So I think if people didn't invite me back to use my gift of music, I would go into depression.
What was it like for you to even start getting back onto that piano or organ bench after the accident?
Well, I didn't think that I would actually ever play again. And there's an arrangement of a 4,000 tongues that I'm going to play in just a little while.
Yes.
And that came into my mind when I was in rehab in Maine, just 3 weeks after the accident. And I thought, I think I can put this together and make it work with one hand and 2 feet. And then I just started moving forward. And when I got back to California, then we had a memorial service for my father. And I went to one of the organists in town and I said, I think we could play a duet together for the memorial service. Let's at least try it. And so we did, and then that worked, and then I just moved on from there.
Wow.
You know, they say music starts within first and then comes out physically manifested in the hands and the feet. And truly, that's where your music began, even as a child, even in the womb. God had placed the music inside of you so that no matter what the exterior circumstances were, you could still allow that music to come out.
Mark, there may be people watching right now who are in the middle of or just gone through a terrible devastation in life. It could be a relationship breakup. It could be a physical problem, an accident. Maybe you could talk to someone right now who just needs to have that glimmer of hope. And they're hearing your story and saying, how could he have ever done that? Maybe you can talk to someone right now, even just look right into that
Sure.
camera.
One of the great things about being raised in the church was the wonderful scripture texts I memorized and the hymn text and the gospel song text, and they just came back to my Christian memory. So if you have that within your background, just let all of that come forth and sustain you and give you strength. And then also, one of the great things about going through tragedy and trauma is that God seems to be so near to us. We're so aware of God's presence, and that if you would just open yourself to the Holy Spirit and allow Jesus to be right there in the situation with you and minister to you, that will bring you through. And also there is a verse in the Psalms that says, it's always darkest just before the dawn. And I was talking to someone last week in California who was so upset about something they had been waiting for months, and we're just about at the edge. And I said, it's always darkest just before the dawn. And the next day they got that phone call that they had received that job that they were longing for and desiring. So in the downtime, use it to become close to God, because you have the time now to do that. And then when you move out, you'll always remember that very, very special time.
Wow, great advice, and I really feel that it's speaking to someone very directly right now as you're watching, and you're realizing that you need to hear from God yourself. You need to reach out to Him. You're in a state right now that you think,